What's going on, everyone? My name is Jasmine. On today's episode of the Slain Project, we're going to be talking about 10 MMIW cases from Canada. And these cases are lesser known, so there's not a lot of information to some of them. And just a warning that some of these cases involve alcohol and drug use, and it is in no way intended to shame the victim, but it can shed light on who may have caused harm to them. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and if you want to see more videos on missing and murdered Indigenous people, click that subscribe button and the notification bell. Now let's get right into it. Rita Powder was Cree and a member of the Alexander First Nation. When she was 15 years old, she began a relationship with a man and moved to Edmonton, Alberta. They had 3 children together. By the time she was 20, they separated and one of her children had died and the other 2 were in foster care. She moved in with her brother Leonard, who also stayed in Edmonton. He said that Rita had a drinking problem, but she was planning to sober up and go to treatment to get her kids back. He said that when she drank, she was never known to cause any problems. Her other brother Mike also tried to get Rita to sober up. He expressed his frustration about her not listening to him. In the same article, the press thought it was necessary to report that Rita relied on public assistance to get by. Leonard last saw Rita when they were bar hopping between the York and International hotels in downtown Edmonton on Friday, June 17, 1977 at about 11:15 or 11:30 p.m. She never made it home that night, but it wasn't unusual for her to stay overnight with friends. When she did not return home by Sunday, her brother became concerned, even more so when he heard about a body being found in the river on the local radio station. Rita was found nude, savagely beaten, raped, and stabbed to death in the chest and stomach areas near the North Saskatchewan River on Sunday, June 19, 1977. An elderly man out for a walk stumbled upon her body. Investigators say that she had been dead for 24 to 48 hours when she was found. They also said that after she had been attacked, that she managed to crawl 20 feet and she died in some underbrush at the bottom of the Grierson Hill and near the low-level bridge. Her clothing, including her underwear, were cut off her body with a knife and discarded at the scene. They also said the murder was a frenzied attack of a person out of control. This person may have other victims due to the vicious nature of the attack. No suspects have ever been identified. A homeless woman camping on the riverbank thought she heard some crying around 4 a.m. on the morning it was believed Rita was murdered. She did not see Rita or anyone else near her campsite. From old newspaper archives I have read, there were a lot of homeless people who stayed along the river in the 1970s and 80s. A lot of bodies have been found murdered near the North Saskatchewan River during this time frame. Her brother Leonard stated that he saw her get into a fight with an unknown man earlier in the week when she was killed. He had punched her and threw her over a fence. Leonard did not get involved with it. It is unknown if this person had any involvement in her murder. Rita was laid to rest in her home reserve of Alexander First Nation. The Edmonton Police Service is still seeking any information you may have on the murder of Rita Powder. Teresa Robinson was 11 years old and lived in Garden Hill First Nation, which is a remote fly-in community on the edge of Island Lake and about 475 kilometers northeast of Winnipeg. The only way in or out is by airplane or the winter ice road. Teresa was the baby of her family. She was the youngest of 5 other children. On May 5th, 2015, Teresa went to a birthday party in her community. She was seen leaving at about 9 p.m., but she never made it home. Her dad said that she often stayed the night with friends, so he wasn't immediately alarmed when she did not come home that night. After 2 days, he began to wonder that something was not right, and Teresa's family and community members began searching for her. Teresa's teacher was also very concerned because she was not showing up for school. She called the RCMP to report her missing on May 11th. She had been missing for 6 days at this point. The RCMP came and a search was initiated. Soon after, the lower half of Teresa's body was found in a wooded area about 1 kilometer from where she was last seen. Her skull was found about 30 meters away. Animals had scattered her remains, and it was initially thought that she had been mauled to death. But it was discovered at her autopsy that she had been sexually assaulted before she was killed. The animals were determined to cause the damage to her body after she already died. After it was determined that Teresa was raped, the RCMP began by collecting DNA samples from the people closest to her. They were able to get about 30 samples, but none of them matched the DNA found on her body. They then spanned out the genetic search and requested DNA samples from male members of the community from ages 15 to 66. They were able to find a match through this round of testing. A 15-year-old boy was named as the prime suspect. He was arrested on May 17, 2016, and charged with first-degree murder. The RCMP would not confirm if he voluntarily gave a DNA sample or if a relative had voluntarily given theirs. But after he was arrested, his DNA was taken again, and this confirmed the positive match that was established earlier. The 15-year-old was not named due to the Youth Criminal Justice Act. He was described as shy and quiet without a lot of friends. He was an orphan and was being raised by his grandmother, who he helped care for. He also spoke his native tongue and struggled to speak English. He was basically hiding in plain sight for a little over a year before he was arrested. He was sentenced to only 6 years, which included 2 years as time served. He is to remain on probation for 4 years after his release. And this was not the most recent tragedy in Garden Hill. Tammy Nattaway was a shy and quiet 16-year-old girl who was in CFS care at the time she went missing. She was placed in various foster homes and even wound up in the care of a relative at one point. This relative said that Tammy often took off with friends for days at a time. Tammy was last seen by her family on July 14, 2020. She was known to be in a relationship with a 15-year-old boy who we will call AK, who had a brother SK. The grandfather of these boys would often pick Tammy up by boat. We will call him WH. WH was a community elder and a member of the United Church. When Tammy's foster relative questioned him about picking up a much younger Tammy, he told them he had permission to do so from CFS. Tammy's grandmother, Lena Harper, asked CFS about this, and they said they never gave WH clearance to do this. Garden Hill is surrounded by water, and traveling by boat is a huge part of life in the area. This area is known as the Island Lake region and consists of Garden Hill, Wasagamak, and St. Teresa Point First Nations. These communities are close-knit and family and friends are spread out between the three communities. Tammy was last known to be visiting at a friend's house with her boyfriend AK on Wasagamak First Nation on July 19th. It is also said that she last posted on social media sometime on July 20th. Her family reported her missing on July 31st after checking everywhere in the Island Lake region for her. 300 volunteer searchers and the RCMP began searching immediately. They went house to house and searched by land, sea, and air. They also used underwater drones and checked the flight logs to see if Tammy had perhaps flown out to Winnipeg. Without finding her on the logs, they believed that she was still in the area and soon began to suspect foul play. Over 100 people have been interviewed, and Tammy's grandma Lena has received numerous tips. In September 2020, a person referred to as RH went to Tammy's grandma and said he knew what happened to her and agreed to take them to the location of her remains. When they picked him up the next morning, he was very quiet, and when they arrived, they did not find anything. Could he have changed his mind and led them to the wrong spot? Anything is possible. And another person came forward in June 2022 and told Lena that 4 people had harmed Tammy and placed her in 3 blue barrels. The people he was referring to were AK, SK, WH, and the brother's sister. When they went to the supposed location, they found lots of red duct tape while searching. An important note here is that a box of red duct tape was found in WH's vehicle when it was previously searched. Another interesting thing is that WH put up his boat for sale on July 21st, the day after Tammy was last known to post on social media. And unfortunately, her cell phone records cannot be obtained because it is stated that she sold her cell phone shortly before she vanished. I was also unable to determine if the RCMP had ever located this boat after it was sold. Also in June 2022, Tammy's jacket was found during one of the searches in the woods in Wasagamik. In articles, it is often described as a sweater. The RCMP did not immediately confirm that it belonged to Tammy and sent it off for forensic analysis. But Tammy's mother, Stephanie, said that it did belong to her daughter. And a final note on this case, Lena said that 3 different medicine men told her that Tammy was in the early stages of pregnancy at the time she disappeared. Could this be a possible motive for murder? We may never know the answer to this. Her boyfriend AK almost agreed to a polygraph test, but pulled out at the last minute after speaking to his grandparents. Where is Tammy Nattaway? At the time she disappeared, she was 5 feet tall and about 100 pounds. Please speak up if you have any information. There is little information out there for Belinda Williams. I have seen missing dates listed anytime between 1976 and 1978. Belinda's father and sister say they last saw her in July 1976 in Vancouver, BC. Belinda's niece, Lorlene Williams, is the founder of the dance group Butterflies in Spirit. The group is based in Vancouver and their mission is to raise awareness for MMIW, MMIP. Lorelei was interviewed on a CBC podcast called Unreserved, and she stated that her family tried to report Belinda missing numerous times, but the RCMP refused to take the report for decades. With the help of a family friend, tribal police in Mount Curie, BC, finally opened a missing persons case in February 2004. On an episode of Taken, Lorelei stated that the family received a tip of a possible location of Belinda's remains. The RCMP says that this piece of information is not enough to launch a search. She could not comment much more to protect the case, but she holds out hope that her family will bring her aunt home one day. At the time she went missing, Belinda was 24 years old, 5 feet 1 inches tall, and weighed about 115 pounds. Jamie McGuire was the mother of 2 children and a member of Gull Bay First Nation. She was born and raised in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Her family last saw her on January 18, 1994, when she dropped her kids off with her mom to babysit. She told her mom that she was going to Winnipeg to celebrate her 20th birthday, which was on January 20th, and that she would return in a few days. Jamie also spoke to an uncle that lived in Winnipeg around Christmas time in 1993. She told him that she was going to be in town after the new year to go shopping for her kids. She seemed to have been planning this trip for at least a few weeks. It was determined that she left Thunder Bay with 5 friends and they arrived in Winnipeg on either the 21st or the 22nd. Jamie somehow got separated from her friends and they returned home without her the following week. Jamie called her dad on January 28th and told him that she was on her way home. But when she never arrived, her family just thought maybe she needed a break. They eagerly awaited her arrival, but when she never came home, she was reported missing in early March. Then on March 17, 1994, a local farmer was driving down a rarely used road 3 kilometers west of the town St. Francois Xavier which is between Winnipeg and Portage la Prairie. He found Jamie's frozen body in a water-filled drainage ditch. It was determined she died of blunt force trauma, and there was a newspaper clipping in her pocket about a motorcycle gang called the Spartans. They were at an event on January 21st, which was around the same time she arrived in Winnipeg. Winnipeg police have investigated this and cannot connect her to the motorcycle gang. They are still baffled why she would have this news clipping in her pocket. The media soon began to portray Jamie as an alcoholic drug abuser and sex worker. Her family denies this and thought the media was attempting to dehumanize her by saying this. An article published on May 22, 1994 says a reporter showed a street worker Jamie's photo and they thought they recognized her. The person was not sure if she was a sex worker, but they said she was hanging around the Mount Royal Hotel in Winnipeg. Jamie's family says that the investigation into her murder has been slow going. They stated that at one time, 4 different police agencies were investigating. They were the RCMP, the Ontario Provincial Police, or OPP, Thunder Bay Police, and the Winnipeg Police Service. These agencies did not share information with each other, which slowed down any progress. Project Devote also took on her case in 2012 and did not make any progress before the group was shut down. There were attempts to link Jamie's murder to her friend Stephanie Edwards, who was found dead in a Thunder Bay dump on January 29, 1994, and to the murder of Donald DeRocher, who was killed on Furby Street in Winnipeg on February 18, 1994. He was a known drug dealer who died of massive head trauma. The word on the street was that it was a drug ripoff and that the second victim would be found in the spring. 2 people were arrested for the murder of Donald, and the murders of Donald and Stephanie have never been connected to Jamie. At one time, RCMP spoke of a 31-year-old suspect who they refused to name. They said he was a convicted drug dealer and was one of 6 people who had contact with Jamie after she left Thunder Bay. RCMP also said that the 5 other people are not considered suspects, and it is possible that these 5 people are the 5 friends she left Thunder Bay with. Jamie's killer has never been identified. Lorlene Bone was a 31-year-old mother of 4 who lived on the Indian Birch First Nation in Manitoba. She left home to visit friends on the nearby Shoal River First Nation, which is about 30 kilometers north of Indian Birch. She never returned home and has never been seen alive again. She was known to check in with her family often, and her disappearance is out of character for her. Here is the timeline of events that the RCMP believes is true. On February 25, 2016, Lorlene was at Indian Birch First Nation. She spent time in Swan River and Shoal River on February 26th and 27th, and possibly the 28th. Lorlene called her mom on February 29th and said she would be home the next day. This was the last time anyone heard from Lorlene. Her family waited for her to return and thought she was with her boyfriend, and when they realized she wasn't, they reported her missing to the Swan River RCMP on March 9, 2016. Lorlene's family began searching for her door to door and checked the ditches along Highway 10 for her body. The family also spent a lot of time searching the woods surrounding Shoal River and focusing on an area known as Beardy's Point. Locals have told her family rumors and said that Lorlene is not in this area and is somewhere else. Sergeant Steve Henson with the Swan River RCMP said that they have conducted numerous searches and followed up on many leads. He went on to say that Lorlene's case is still considered a missing persons case and that foul play has not been ruled out. The RCMP do acknowledge that she may no longer be alive. Her mother, Evelyn Chartrand, believes that Lorlene is no longer living, but she desperately wants to find her remains so she can lay her daughter to rest. She has set up a Facebook page called Let's Find Lorlene Bone. Lorlene is 5 feet 5 inches tall and was about 150 pounds when she was last seen. She has brown hair that is sometimes dyed red or blonde. The area where Lorlene lived and disappeared from is very remote and isolated. Her remains may never be found. The Swan River RCMP is asking for any information on Lorlene's whereabouts before her last phone call and any other information you may have on her disappearance. You can call them at 204-434-4686. Nancy Gladue was a 39-year-old mother who lived in Edmonton, Alberta. On June 21, 1981, she was visiting with a friend on 106th Avenue. She left her friend's home at about 2:30 p.m. and said that she was going a few blocks away to see another friend named Frenchie. After that, she was supposed to arrive at her daughter's house on 127th, but she never arrived. The next day, on June 22nd, 3 teenagers were driving through a field near 167th Avenue and 82nd Street when they discovered Nancy's body. She was found on the side of a vehicle path that led through the field and was only wearing a red plaid shirt and bra. Her death was ruled a homicide, and she had injuries consistent with being run over by a car. She had a broken skull, broken ribs, a torn right lung. Her abdomen and liver were crushed, and there was a tire mark across her chest. It was also learned that she had consumed a large amount of alcohol before her death. Her BAC level was at 0.32. During the investigation, police talked to 4 people who said that they saw a car in the field at about 1 a.m. on June 22nd. Police never found the driver of this vehicle, and it is unknown if they had anything to do with Nancy's murder. Detective N.J. McLeod stated at the inquiry ruling Nancy's death as a homicide that it would be difficult to prove that she was deliberately run over. He said if a person was as drunk as Nancy, that they might not even realize they ran her over. He made it seem like it was normal to fall asleep in an empty field wearing only a button-up plaid shirt and bra. Where were the rest of her clothes? It was never stated if she had been sexually violated. After the detective made this comment, Nancy's daughter Rose Gladue asked, "You don't suppose that she could have been beaten up first, then taken out there?" The judge responded and said that it was not consistent with the medical evidence presented to him during the inquiry. No matter what the detective or judge thought, someone out there took Nancy, removed her socks, shoes, pants, and underwear. She was then discarded in the field where she was later found. Who dumped Nancy in that field, and were they the same person who ran her over? Her case is still open, and the Edmonton Police Service have her listed on their website and are actively taking any tips you may have. Susan Assin was a 20-year-old woman from Grassy Narrows First Nation located in Ontario. She lived with her large family on the reservation. She was one of 11 children the family had. Susan left her home on June 13, 1974 to travel to the city of Kenora to visit friends and family. The plans were for her to stay for about a week. Susan was seen for the last time on June 17, 1974. Her body was found shortly after about 15 kilometers north of Highway 17 and just off Jones Road. Jones Road is also known by highway number 671, and it leads straight to Grassy Narrows. Could Susan have been trying to hitchhike home when she was murdered? Susan was only wearing socks and had blunt force trauma to the head and was stabbed to death. Her family believes that she could have been stoned to death and was stabbed with a screwdriver. The Ontario Provincial Police have never confirmed if either of these claims are true. Susan's sister Joyce has stated that Susan struggled with alcohol and drug use before she was murdered, and that she believes Susan often visited Kenora to party. Joyce also said that Susan could sometimes be violent while drinking, but doesn't understand why someone would kill Susan. The OPP is offering a $50,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest for the murder of Susan Assin. Sonya Cywink was 31 years old and a member of the Whitefish River First Nation, an Ojibwe band located in Ontario. Sonya came from a large family and was the youngest of 13 siblings. Sonya was living in London, Ontario with a roommate. She was not close to her siblings that lived in the area. However, Susan was close to her sister Maggie Cywink, who lived in Toronto at the time. Maggie has stated that Sonya was assaulted as a teen, which caused her to self-medicate. This led to addictions that caused her to live life on the streets. Sonya was in a treatment center sometime in 1993 and was sober for a while. She was gaining her confidence and was looking healthy again. But Maggie had run into her in London a little before she disappeared, and she knew Sonya was not sober again. She offered Sonya to come with her, but she said that she was okay. Maggie did not know at the time that Sonya was working the streets and was pregnant at the time. Sonya made plans with Maggie to meet her at a Toronto Blue Jays game for her birthday, but she never showed up. Maggie didn't think much at first, but her gut feeling was that something was not right, and she was correct. On August 24, 1994, Sonya was seen for the last time at about 2 a.m. on Lyle and Dundas streets in London, Ontario. She seemed to have vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, in Toronto, Maggie had a strange urge to drive to London. She arrived on August 29th, and Sonya's body was found the next day on August 30th. She was found only wearing a t-shirt and socks at a native historical site called South Wold Earthworks, which is about 65 kilometers west of London. Her cause of death could not be determined by the time her body was found, but there were signs of blunt force trauma. It was also determined that Sonya was 24 weeks pregnant, which is the equivalent to 6 months. Sonya was brought home and buried on the Whitefish River First Nation in early September of 1994. In 1998, her family held a ceremony at the Southwold Earthworks site where her body was found. A Lakota medicine woman gave Sonya the spirit name Whirlwind Woman. The family also named her unborn baby Jacob. Sergeant Chris Gayson with the Ontario Provincial Police was the first one assigned to the case. Chris said that the investigation into Sonya's murder took him to the roughest parts of London. He also said that a lot of people who knew Sonya are still alive and that someone most likely knows who killed her. In fact, he is confident that more than one person knows. This is a very bold statement to make. Perhaps he knows by analyzing the crime scene or evidence that more than one person was involved in her murder. Investigators announced in 2004 that they had a break in the case and were very close to solving it. Other than this statement, nothing ever happened. It is unknown what evidence they had or who they believed was responsible. Sonya's murder is still unsolved to this day. More recently, on the 25th anniversary of her murder, billboards were put up around the London area to seek out new leads. The OPP are offering a $50,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of the person or persons who murdered Sonya. Her family has also added an additional $10,000 to the reward fund. Please come forward with any information you have about the murder of Sonya Cywink. Shelly Dene was 25 years old at the time she went missing and was a member of the Fort McKay First Nation. Shelly grew up in the Fort McMurray and Fort McKay areas in northern Alberta. She was the middle of 3 kids. When she was 11 years old, her mom and dad split up. Her mom moved with the kids to the Kelowna and Vernon areas of British Columbia. Shelly had a son named Ivan when she was about 20 years old. Shelly had lost custody of him due to her addictions. She sobered up for 3 years and did everything she could to get him back. Then her dad died in 2012. Shelly drove to Alberta from BC and stayed at his bedside until he died. The stress of everything was too much and she began using again. She sobered up again but was still unsuccessful at getting her son back. To turn her life around, she moved to Edmonton to stay with her grandma Katie Dene in January of 2013. She lived in an apartment in the vicinity of 114th Street and 102nd Avenue. Shelly's family said that she started dating a man who was controlling and was verbally and mentally abusive. He had a drug and alcohol problem, and Shelly started to party with him. Shelly kept a low profile at her grandma's house. Most of her family did not even know that she was staying there. Her aunt and sister Candace have described that they were surprised when they learned she was back in Edmonton. Candace reconnected with Shelly at her daughter's first birthday party on May 11th, 2013. Candace was in Edmonton and visiting her grandma at the time. This would be the last time she ever saw Shelly in person. They started calling and texting each other on a regular basis. Both Candace and her grandma Katie have said that they only met Shelly's new boyfriend once. Katie would later recall that the man was dressed in all beige and looked like he could have been a truck driver. Katie would later ask Shelly to watch her apartment for her while she went on summer vacation. Shelly agreed and Katie left. She was the last family member to see Shelly. Meanwhile, Candace had spoken to Shelly on the phone on August 26th. She said Shelly seemed sad and not herself. She then told Candace that she had to go and hung up the phone. Candace followed up with a text message on August 28th and asked her sister if she was okay. Shelly responded with a simple no. This was the last time Candace ever had contact with her. Katie returned from her vacation a few weeks later and Shelly was gone. Her luggage was gone and Katie thought she went to the Yukon. Shelly had been talking about traveling there for a while. Candace kept calling and texting Shelly between August and November 2013 without any response. She woke up one morning in November and decided to call Shelly's phone. It was disconnected and this alarmed Candace. Shelly's phone was her lifeline to keep in touch with her family and friends. Candace began to ask all her family if they had heard from Shelly recently, but no one did. She then went on Shelly's Facebook friends list and started asking them. No one had seen or heard from Shelly. It has been stated that the last time anyone heard from her was at the end of August. This is probably from Candace's last interactions with her. Candace also went to the Edmonton Police Service, also known as EPS, to file a report right away. They didn't seem concerned at all and told Candace to check at hospitals, jails, and with Shelly's friends. They also victim blamed Shelly and said that she lived a high-risk lifestyle due to her alcohol and drug use. Candace explained that she already checked everywhere and that it doesn't matter if Shelly used alcohol or drugs. She was missing and they needed help from the EPS. Candace had even went around her grandma's neighborhood and questioned possible witnesses about activity around the apartment while her grandma was on vacation in August 2013. Someone had told her that they saw a man at the apartment who was taking suitcases out to his car. When she told this to the police, they said, "How is anyone going to tell us if they've seen that person?" The possibility to question the witness hadn't even occurred to them yet. Candace has even contacted RCMP detachments in BC and the Yukon. Constable Shelly Pinch with the Edmonton Missing Persons Unit has stated that Shelly may have left to the Yukon with a First Nations male in a red truck. Other than this, they have not released anything else, but they are still actively seeking tips. Shelly's son Ivan was adopted by a Caucasian family in BC. Multiple people in Shelly's family had tried to gain custody and adopt him, but the courts would not allow it, even though they were qualified to do so. They are deeply hurt by this because he is all they have left of Shelly. They are also disappointed because the court system did not even seem to want to keep the family together. This is not uncommon, and many Indigenous people compare the child welfare system in Canada to a modern-day form of residential school. The system removes children from their homes where they lose their language, culture, and family ties. I encourage you, if you have any information on the disappearance of Shelly Dene or her boyfriend at the time, please reach out to the Edmonton Police Service. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you knew any of these victims, please share any memories of them, and I will see you in my next video.